mean, Cohen rode Trump's coattails as long as it profited him, and when it didn't anymore and things got too tough, he broke and became a weasel and repudiated his prior career for Trump and his friendship and admiration for him, and now seeks any opportunity to promote himself on it. I mean, it's a terrible way and disgusting way to live your life, but that's the path that Michael Cohen has chosen.
It's 8:23, and it could be another uncomfortable week for Donald Trump at his hush money trial in New York. After the salacious details from Stormy Daniels' evidence last week, the court will hear from Trump's former lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen. He's the prosecution's star witness, once so close to Trump he called him the boss. He's now taken to mocking him and indeed talking him down. Here is Michael Cohen speaking about how Trump's wealth was inflated.
Of course, he's embarrassed because his entire net worth, the constant reiteration that I'm worth at least $10 billion, maybe even more, obviously goes to his id, his ego, his super ego, and that's now super deflated because it's just not true.
Well, let's speak to someone who knows the former president. Joe Grogan was Donald Trump's director of domestic policy. Joe, good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Just to pick up on something Michael Cohen said in that clip there, to what extent is Donald Trump being embarrassed, humiliated even by this trial, do you think?
Well, it's certainly not a pleasant experience. I mean, anybody would be suffering for what he's going through. I mean, this is clearly a political prosecution, and there's things being brought up, including, as you mentioned, the Stormy Daniels testimony that's really outrageous and irrelevant and clear grounds for a mistrial under New York state law. So I'm sure, as you know, you can tell by his tweets and his demeanor and the press conferences he does, that he's infuriated, and the entire proceeding has him upset.
It's interesting what you say about a mistrial, because the judge has actually thrown those claims out once or twice, actually, in the last few days alone.
Sure. Well, the judge also allowed Stormy Daniels to testify over the objection of the defense attorneys, so it's not really any great surprise, but under New York state law, and they recently had a decision, the Court of Appeals, the highest court in New York, irrelevant inflammatory testimony like this is grounds for a mistrial, and there was just a major case for Harvey Weinstein that the conviction was overturned for details that were far less salacious than what Stormy Daniels has testified to.
Let's talk about Michael Cohen, who is being held up as something of the star witness of the prosecution, and perhaps for obvious reasons. He was very close to Donald Trump. He was his fixer. Did you encounter him? Did you know him at all?
I'm fortunate never to have met Michael Cohen.
But you were familiar with him and his work?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. What do you make of his character? How would you describe Michael Cohen?
Oh, I mean, he's a Class A idiot, and he rose well beyond his level of competence in business, courtesy of Donald Trump. And
Does that make Donald Trump an idiot?
No, it makes him, somebody who has hired people who've done very well through their associations and their business dealings. And as soon as things got dicey, and I'm sure that nobody around Trump understood the level of scrutiny they were going to go under, the pressure they'd be under when he became president, the outrageous claims, including, the Russia collusion hoax, various impeachments. He broke, and he's tried to cut deals and profit off of his relationship with Trump, and he's currently doing the same, which is another grounds for mistrial, and it's going to be problematic for the prosecution. Even if they are able to achieve a prosecution here, it's going to be grounds for overturning it later on, because Cohen's clearly profiting off his testimony and promoting his hatred of Trump on TikTok and various other platforms.
I'm so fascinated, I suppose, by lots of what you say. On Michael Cohen specifically, I mean, he was somebody who worked closely with Trump. He indeed handled the payment to Stormy Daniels. He's already served 13 months in prison after pleading guilty to tax evasion and breaching campaign finance laws over the transaction. By way of a star witness for the prosecution, you can understand why he is being labelled as such, can't you?
Well, it's all they've got. I mean, really, all they've got that's relevant.
What more do they need?
Well, he's a convicted perjurer. He's admitted to lying numerous times. He's got stories every which way. And he's willing to testify to anything and agree to anything in order to wiggle out of trouble. So it's going to be a heated cross-examination, no question. I mean, I haven't been in the courtroom, but as a member of the New York State Bar and a native of New York State, Based upon the observations, the jury was very uncomfortable with Stormy Daniels' testimony, and we'll see how they react to Michael Cohen's. But it's going to be difficult. He's going to have a couple tough days on the stand, no question.
Yeah. In terms of, I suppose, Michael Cohen and his relationship now with Donald Trump, I mean, it's fair to say that it is, something verging on extremely bitter. I think we can safely say. But he was once described as a mega fan of Donald Trump. I just wonder if Donald Trump has an effect on people close to him, as you have been. I don't know if you would still say you are.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So he perhaps he doesn't burn everyone that he is close with and works with, but it certainly seems that he leaves a lot of people with something of a sour taste.
Well, it's tough working for him. Some people can't handle it. I watched people in the White House who couldn't handle it. I was exhilarated by it. I found him to be a very demanding boss, but it didn't bother me. I mean, Cohen rode Trump's coattails as long as it profited him, and when it didn't anymore and things got too tough, he broke and became a weasel, and repudiated his prior career for Trump and his friendship and admiration for him, and now seeks any opportunity to promote himself on it. I mean, it's a terrible way and disgusting way to live your life, but that's the path that Michael Cohen has chosen.
Yeah. In terms of you knowing Donald Trump, working with him, he is no stranger to scandal. Indeed, he was impeached twice. How does he respond in periods of these sorts of intense public scrutiny when he is, being held to account or being held up to be held to account?
Well, I mean, to his credit, he's incredibly strong. I mean, I certainly would have broken. I think most people would break. Other presidents would have broken under this level of scrutiny and venom. But he's fought. It's a hallmark of his entire career in the private sector and in politics. I think it's one of the reasons why so many of his supporters are so exhilarated by him and stand by him. So many voters have said they'll vote for nobody else but Trump because they see him constantly fighting and not backing down. He could have done, in any number of times throughout his presidency, he could have pivoted, he could have kowtowed, he could have chosen not to run again, and none of these prosecutions would be going on. I'm 100% confident of that. Had he announced in February 2021, I'm not running again, I'm done with politics, none of these prosecutions would be ongoing.
What makes you say that?
Well, because they're all politically motivated. I mean, this is ridiculous what he's going through. This case in New York, no one has ever been prosecuted under this theory before. They still, after all these many days of testimony and evidence, have not alleged or shown any evidence of an actual crime having been committed. And they bring in all these salacious details just to smear Trump, which, bringing in Stormy Daniels has the other effect of discrediting him in the public eye and in some people's views. So that's a win for the prosecution. And the Democratic DA who was elected and by the overwhelmingly Democratic voters of New York and said that he was going to target Trump.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm just so intrigued by so much of that because actually a trial, as you will know, a criminal trial, as we all know, is there to establish fact. Clearly, this thing is not concluded yet, and we are yet to hear from, as we're talking about, somebody like Michael Cohen, who may yet establish more fact. There is a jury, there is a judge. This is due process unfolding before our very eyes and ears. And the extension of your argument would seem to be, logically, that somebody who has been president should not be held to account ever.
No, he shouldn't be. He shouldn't be hounded. He shouldn't be.
He's being held to account.
Persecuted. Not for any crime. This is ridiculous.
That's what we're investigating.
Held to account for what? I mean, no president has ever been prosecuted for this. No human being has ever been prosecuted
so it
under
should never
this
happen.
Theory. If he had committed an actual crime, there's no crime here. What is the crime that he's alleged to have committed?
Well, we don't know that yet because the trial hasn't concluded.
The trial's ongoing. It would be nice to understand what crime he's been charged with and what the elements are and have that presented before the jury. This theory has never been presented before that this is somehow a campaign contribution and a fraud. By the way, the Federal Justice Department looked at this and refused to prosecute it. The Federal Election Commission, which has jurisdiction over this, refused to say that this was a violation. And now we find ourselves in state district court with a prosecution with a Biden acolyte who has resigned from the Department of Justice in order to go work for the Manhattan DA and do this. So, no, I'm sorry, but this isn't being held to account. Or this isn't being held responsible for your actions. This is completely ridiculous and over the top, and it's gross. I've gotten progressively more infuriated as the weeks have gone by, as a member of the New York State Bar, as an observer, as an American citizen, to watch this miscarriage of justice and watch the United States descend into some type of banana republic nightmare where we're prosecuting former presidents for anything we can get our hands on.
Okay. Do you accept any responsibility, having been part of Trump's administration, for what you are describing? So already in this interview, you referred to the Russia collusion hoax. Now, you're referring to Robert Mueller's investigation, and as part of his conclusion, he spent almost 200 pages describing numerous links between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. You've talked about the irrelevant Stormy Daniels evidence, but at the core of this is Trump's denial that there was ever an affair that he had with Stormy Daniels, and he maintains
Right.
that the payments to Michael Cohen were for legal services, and you keep referring to the politicization of the justice system. How much of this is as a result of you and the Trump administration undermining the institutions of the USA, including the justice system, during your time in office and now, today?
That is ludicrous. It has been the entire Russia hoax nonsense was about that Donald Trump had colluded with Russia, and the only reason why he beat Hillary Clinton was because the Russians helped him. That's a bunch of crap.
Okay, so Mueller was
Hillary
unable
Clinton
to
lost
establish
that
a
election
conspiracy.
all on her own. She
Sure.
lost that election all on her own, and oh, by the way, Donald Trump won it fair and square. 2 years they destabilized his presidency. They took out the U.S. Attorney General Sessions, took him off the playing field, and persecuted this president. They changed the course of American history with that Russian collusion hoax investigation for 2 years. And every night on the nightly news, they trumpeted that ridiculous charge. By the way, Stormy Daniels has changed her story numerous times around this. She's changed it, and she repudiated it in writing that she ever had it. She has said publicly that she didn't have an affair. Then she said publicly she did.
This
she
time
said
she was under oath.
She said she wasn't coerced. Then she said she was coerced. I mean, it's ridiculous. She's not a reliable witness, and no responsible prosecutor would put her on the stand, and no responsible judge should have allowed her to testimony. The testimony was outrageous.
Okay. Joe Grogan, it's really interesting to spend some time speaking to you. Thank you very much. Thanks for being
Welcome.
here. We'll keep in touch
Thanks
as
for having
the
me.
trial continues.